Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. Liz D'Alto here, your host of Untamed the Wild Soul Woman, and we are back with one of my favorite women on the planet. And to remind you, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is about having really great conversations with powerful and inspiring women to chat about how they transcend their fears and their struggles to live meaningful lives with purpose that feel really good. And Chela is actually the woman that set me on this path, helped me put all the pieces together, get rid of the ones I didn't need in 2013 when I myself was just in this kind of transitional place, had no idea what the hell was going on. All I knew was that there was no way I was going to be able to navigate it on my own. So Chela is an integral coach, mastery level, whatever that means. You'll see by the end of this conversation, she is definitely a master. But she's just fantastic, and I'm super excited to have her here. So hi, Chela.
Hi, Liz. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me here.
You are so welcome. And I have been asking not every woman the same exact set of questions, but the same first question. And this kind of determines how the rest of the interview unfolds. So no pressure.
No pressure.
What do you love about being a woman?
Oh, whoa, cool. All of it. Yeah, all of it. I love being a emotional, loving, full, creative. Not that men can't be these things, but like, I love that. I love the chaos of being in the human experience, but in the female body. I think our bodies are pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love that you said it's not that men can't be these things, because, you know, maybe this is someone's first interview that they're watching in the series if they've just dropped in randomly. And this is not about men bashing. This is not about saying untame the wild soul women and screw men in any way, shape, or form. It's just about a conversation really that you and I had a couple weeks ago when we were in Colorado around this culture and this conditioning that we've all grown up in. Where it's a patriarchal culture. It's a word that I shy away from using, but we're going to go there
Right.
because our behaviors, the education systems, and I know you're in Canada, so things might differ a little bit, but for the most part, this is a global thing. Yeah. So all those things you love about being a woman,
Yeah.
were you always fully expressing them in your personal and professional life?
No. I would say no, and I would say maybe I'm still not fully expressing them in my personal and professional life. You know, I almost like a continuum's kind of the wrong word, but like a continuous unfolding, unraveling, unkinking of the parts that are out of alignment or closed or all like wrapped up.
Yeah.
You know, I'd say I've always been pretty self-expressed. You know, like my mother was like, you were kind of hard to parent because you kind of parented yourself.
Yeah.
And for the record, Mom did a great job parenting. But like, I've always had a lot of self-expression and willfulness and what I wanted. But what I will say to this tune of culture is there are things that I used to want or I thought I wanted, and I didn't know why I wanted them.
Yeah.
And so that's why it feels continuous. I'm sure there are things now that feel like our self-expression that's really just been conditioned into me. But certainly I'm a lot freer than my darling 21-year-old self.
So can we flash back a little bit?
Totally.
And share with us what were some of those things that you thought you wanted because you were supposed to? Because I guarantee there are women listening still, probably in jobs, maybe in relationships, maybe with families, maybe living in places, and they've got everything checked off and it looks good on paper, but it probably, maybe not all of it is resting, joyfully or calmly, peacefully, because it's not exactly aligned, to use the word you used.
Yeah, well, and I think partly what I've come to see is that alignment, it really is. I mean, some of it can be collective. Like I think there are some like universal things that we long for, whether it's as women or as human beings, and then some is really personal. Like what kind of lifestyle works for me? You know, how do I want to spend my mornings? How do I want to spend my afternoons? How do I want to express my gifts in the world? Whatever you look at in different ways. But I would say some key themes. So. Oh, this is so fun. So, how I feel about my body or should feel about my body. I'm just going to punch off some themes and then I can.
Yeah. And actually, I'm probably going to write down a couple things that you say so we can come back to it. So keep going.
Okay. Like what success looks like or what success is supposed to look like. So what I'm supposed to have, I remember and this almost feels like, what? Although I know this is really important to a lot of people, but this is like a specific, like I remember it feeling important to me to get a diamond ring from my husband.
Yeah.
I remember that feeling important. And now that feels like, why would that be important? And like, I get all like industry and that's not an expression and we've been duped and F this, and, very different kind of like, if you get me a diamond ring, like that'll be disappointing, which is different than. So that would be like a real specific example of what I thought I wanted and what I thought it was an expression of and why I thought it was important. And a lot around success, what success is supposed to look like. One thing that I feel I've come a long way in, but still grapple with the habits of around my values around work. Like I remember so I owned a hair salon, which I started when I was 19. And that was all like, woo, look at this go as I fly into something that I have no idea what I'm doing on blind enthusiasm. And it worked well. But I remember at the beginning, there was a lot of like, I should be working more. I should be working harder. I should have my shit. And somewhere in there, it was like I actually glamorized workaholism. Mm-hmm. Before I was actually had some edges around work. And this, I think, all over the place for women of like what we're all supposed to be of value, like everything, first of all, hot and smart and successful and working hard, but at home with our kids and blah, 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 like all that. And now, what's been an untangling for me is in identifying with, I'm really of value if I work hard and I'm successful and I pour everything I've got into, morning, noon, and night. Like that looks good to work an 18-hour day. And then I established some habits around that. And now I don't actually hold those values at all. And I'm like untangling these habits or things that I've become identified with or see that work, that don't actually work.
Yeah.
Touched on body before. Body sexuality. Like I would find myself in, so what is it that like, do I really think that this specific thing needs to be changed about my body? Or is what it means to be a woman is to just be perpetually dissatisfied with your body. So I just got to find something to get hung up on and then spend some money to fix it because there's something wrong with me. Really luscious evolution. And then even like sexuality, dating, like what I'm supposed to be as an attractive woman. So exploring masculine, feminine energies, getting all caught up in that. I'm supposed to be more feminine. I'm not supposed to be as masculine as I am and all that. So
much good stuff. So I'm going to come to body for a moment, not surprisingly. Because you said something that I am willing to bet a lot of women don't even realize they're playing out in their life, which is this, does what it means to be a woman include being perpetually dissatisfied with my body? Because, so I can relate to that in the sense of, right now, I'm not in the best shape of my life, but I have been like 3 years ago. But when I was, I did not look in the mirror and go, yeah, this is the jam. Get it, girl? Like slap my own ass. there was still things I wanted to do, things I wanted to improve. And my relationship to my body is super different now. This is not about me, and this is about your journey, though. And I know you work with many women, high profile even. And actually, I think you have 5 or 6 clients on the speaker roster for this event. So I'm sure this stuff comes up a lot with women in all contexts, right? Whether it's being a mom, whether it's intimately in their own bedroom, in their own home, whether it's more intimately just in front of their own mirror, or whether it's their visibility out in the world, depending on what they do.
Mm-hmm. Want me to just say?
Yeah. I was going to ask a question, but that big breath, go ahead, say whatever.
I'll say thanks.
I trust you.
Okay, thanks. So, well, when I was 10, maybe I had this subscription where it was kind of like a build on magazine. So I had a binder and it had sections like health and like, and then you get a little thing in the mail and you'd add it in. And I remember there was like this ab workout, and it started with every woman wants a flat stomach.
That's what it said?
That's what it said. Every woman wants a flat stomach. And I remember this moment of going, really? Like, shit, I'm prepubescent or like just going through that. I don't know. I didn't know that every woman wanted a flat stomach. That's when I found out. And don't we all want a flat stomach? And so that was a moment where I needed to go get a flat stomach. But the interpretation, I think, is important because it wasn't what it means to be a woman is to have a flat stomach. It's what it means to be a woman is to want a flat stomach. And there's really not much that says, when you feel good, let other people know. When you feel good, let yourself know. Look at your body with reverence, with delight, enjoy it. And so even like in that time, you know, it's like I learned then to criticize my body. And certainly in front of other girls, we all started criticizing our body. There was like, through adolescence, this joining in our mutual self-hatred, not in our mutual self-enjoyment. And if a girl would say something like, I look good, or I feel good, or this, I feel really hot, there would be like, crush that. So, I mean, that whole, and then we bring that into adulthood, and whether it is our bodies or motherhood, like you touched on all these topics, you know, and let's blame marketing, not as an easy out, but just like, this is what's happening. So as we are having all of these messages, and then we build on them and we reinforce them with what we buy, with what we put our attention on, with what we strive for. And so when you talked about that moment of, I was in better shape and I still found something. It's like we're so in the entrenched habit of wherever we are, we need to pick and look layer of perfection. Sure, so I'm at the weight I want to be at, but like, ooh, now I better, I don't know, do something about those stretch marks, whatever people do. I don't know, laser things. Is that, do people?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Cocoa butter.
Yeah. Cocoa butter. Maybe.
Just slather it on, girl.
Slather it on. Do something. So yeah, it's, you know, it starts at a certain point, and I think most of us aren't aware of it. And I've gone through where I kind of have these ahas about what I've become identified with. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like even the first time I filmed video, and I now have videos on my site, and I've got a lot of ease, and it's fine, and I can watch myself and not want to like vomit and run away. Video back was when I was making a promotional video, and the first thought I had when I saw it was, well, it was like, oh my God, that obese girl cannot go on video. Like the was so like filled me with shame and disgust. Just seeing myself, who, by the way, I am not an obese person. And even if I was, like, that's the reaction that culturally we have to ourselves, we have to others, in this like pick apart thing. But what was interesting was one I noticed was there was some narrative of women who are seen, women who are visible, shouldn't look like that. Which is like really heartbreaking and gross. So then I was like, well, now I just got to make video.
Yeah.
because like women should just be seen and
Yes.
heard
Yes.
in
Yes.
all of who we are and how we're not, rather
Yeah.
than sculpting, perfecting, getting to somewhere before we can actually, from what we look like to what our views are, what our opinions are, what we stand for.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, and as you know, so I used to work primarily in the fitness industry, and I have a number of friends who also are fitness coaches, and specifically I have a few friends who have coached fitness models. And when it's your job to be in that peak shape and literally have visible abs, like everyone watching this, like, do you know how hard it is to have visible abs? Like, the regimented and structured and refined lifestyle you need to lead to actually have that is just not something most people would want to do or get any enjoyment out of it. So, from behind the scenes, the women that you see on the cover of magazines or women you see with like these incredible physiques, many of them have metabolic damage. A lot of emotional trauma and issues, stress, anxiety, sleeping issues, and not all, but that's the truth. To maintain that body and that lifestyle that is put on this pedestal.
Yeah.
So what I love that you said was about women should just be seen, and it brings me back to something I've been saying a lot for this whole year, which is that for centuries, women were just art. That was it. Mm-hmm. When you look back at old paintings, old sculptures, you know, there's rolls, girl. There's curves. There's bumps. Like, these bellies are not necessarily flat. It's more like supple and voluptuous. So there's this call in this interview right now to celebrate your body and treat it as art, exactly as it is. So I want to know,
yeah,
when did you realize that that was governing your treatment and your identification with your own body? And how have you changed either your behavior, your habits, or your view of your own self?
Well, I think it's shifted over time. Like probably the first time I became aware of it. Did you ever like in teachers say like write a letter to yourself and then open it later? Have you ever played that game? Yeah. So we did that in 8th grade. So I would have been 13, wrote this letter, and at the time, like, I wanted to act, I wanted to be an actress, and in my letter to myself, aside from like going on and on about the boys I had crushes on, things I want to wear. Like, it was so deep. It was so deep. But I want to lose this weight.
Oh, man.
And then I'm going to go get an agent. And then I read it when I was 17. And I was still in, I'm sure the actress thing was off the board, but I was still in, there are things that I will do once I'm thinner. And getting to have that contrast, it was like a kick in the stomach. Like, this is gross. And so, and then, you know, through my 20s, there was, you know, do you ever do probably like how many women out there, you know, like all my best friends would get married somewhere hot where we'd be in bikinis, right? So it'd be like before this wedding, before that event, you know, there would always be. So I started to notice that there would be a timeline of something I was preparing for. And this shows up in all sorts of ways, but mostly it was around my body. So I'm going to do something to make myself better. And this timeline is the end of that. And probably the first time it all, the striving to lose weight stopped was when I got in the best shape of my life. And my being identified with being, you know, I want to lose 10 pounds, I want to lose 20 pounds, whatever my thing was. I was so identified with that cycle that when I actually got to not wanting to lose weight or need, like, I remember there being like this no compute identity kind of thing where it was like, I didn't know. And so then I went and like gained 10 pounds back, and I went, that's it. So, you know, are there times where I want to, yeah, there are times where I'm like, I want to be thinner. Sure. I'm not free of it. Right. I'm so not free of it. There are times where I want to be strong, where, you know, I also kind of have the mind of where I want to like create a goal and do stuff. Like, that's kind of how I orient around, like, let's do things and make things happen. But I don't feel now what I've managed to do is I don't feel my worth collapsed with what my body looks like. You know, I'm like getting gray hair now, and my skin's changing and I'm like entering my mid 30s. And I'm not saying that that is old, just being like super clear. And it's not 20. So I'm feeling my, I'm a mom. So my body's changed in all these ways. And I can either judge that, freak out about that, and spend a lot of money. Or I can learn how to like enjoy myself and move in it and be accepting of that and make goals that are around feeling good and expressing myself.
Yes.
Also, I don't let my body be the reason why I won't do anything.
Yes.
Like that's done. I will say that is completely done. That's a never comes up. Whether it's like going to the pool with some friends or being like pursuing things in my career, anything.
Yeah, I love that because so for sure, I've always been very athletic. So I never had one of those moments of being like super overweight or anything. But I for sure did grow up around women constantly, what you just said, letting their body not be the reason for something, letting their body be the reason why they already knew ahead of time they were going to have a miserable time at something, right? It's like, well, I already know I'm going to hate this because I'm going to feel like crap in my dress and I don't know what to wear. So I bet, by the way, no one in my family sounds like that. But I'm sure a lot of women can relate to that body identification. So I like this topic of the identification because, again, and that was dictated. That was literally handed to you when you were 10 years old. So the hardworking one, that other identification, so whether it's proving I'm enough because I can work my ass off or because my business does this or I make this much money or I can spin the most plates. That's a story a lot of women have. Like I can multitask anything. Where are you with still being identified by that, and how did you kind of come out of that as well?
Well, I think some of it has been an evolution around how I hold success versus, I think a lot of it is, I don't know that was very conscious. Like it's conscious looking back, right?
Right.
At the time, it was like busy people are good, successful people are good. I don't even think I had you need to work hard to be successful. That's never, I was almost more of a, like, if it's not fun, you're doing it wrong kind of
cool
way. But there's like, I'm still identified with my work. I still really am. And, but it's shifted and I don't actually know. So to be totally honest, I don't actually know if the shift in identification is better or healthier. It feels like it is, but that could just be like my egoic spin. So
cool.
I don't know. But one thing, I think that culturally, like even in the 90s, the 90s were booming. Everybody's like, yeah, buy things, acquire stuff. It's still all over Facebook feeds. Like, have your 6-figure business. There's a lot of emphasis on how much money we have or how much on the status of things. And I don't identify with that. And I don't know that I ever really did. Maybe a bit, like that diamond ring thing. But for me, it was never really around status, but there was definitely an impulse to build something. And now I feel that my identification with my work, it's like it's got a lot of soulfulness to it, but I definitely feel like sometimes there's this kind of ferocious urgency around, I need to be of service. There's a lot of suffering in this world. Mm-hmm. There's a lot about the systems of what we're in that's so messed up.
Yeah.
And I am somebody who can do something about it. I'm smart. I'm competent. I'm capable. I'm privileged. I have freedom. I have rights. There's a lot of people who can't do a damn thing about the situations in the world. And so I feel like I can, and I have the capacity to, and I am. That can, and there's a deep desire to. So you see what I mean? So that it doesn't, that feels like a healthy, pure impulse.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can get to where I will just keep going and keep going. And I'll actually override my body, and learning to override my body from the objectification of the body that we've learned or just talked about, that we become identified with. That is one way to override our body. So our body as an object is something that we're supposed to perfect. So then it's harder to actually listen to what the body needs. So they kind of come together. And that'll be something where I'll be like, whoa, hey, I should go or lie on the floor or go for a walk. And that's been something over the last couple of years that I've been untangling more and giving more, giving my body voice of what my body needs, because my will and my desire to do good work in the world can override that.
Yeah. And for people listening, I'm pretty sure you probably all kind of feel that twinge like, oh, I want, there must be something I can do. I have the privilege. I have the freedom. And even if you don't have a business, you know, for some people, it's just like, I want to raise my family to the best of my ability. What's cool. And so one of the other interviews in the series, I interviewed Rochelle Sheik, and she talked a lot about being part of the collective and how like my own practice, my own healing serves everyone. Yeah. Because even though I'm just one person, I am also one person in this collective. So cumulatively, any effort I put towards myself, it has a ripple effect that none of us will ever be able to measure. So I like how you weaved the two together, and you mentioned the objectification of the body and how that also rolls into like work habits and this idea of let me override my body. And so what I want to ask next is then, and I love how you mentioned I'm still in it. Maybe your answer is I don't know, but what kind of, and so for you, I know as a coach, one of the things you do is you develop practices for clients. Like your practices changed my friggin' life and the trajectory of everything for me last year. So even if it's not for your own self, I feel like you can answer this question quite well. What are practices you either use yourself or that you recommend for people to actually help them not as much override their body with their head?
Yeah, well, I think part of it is actually connecting to the body. So two things that I feel like are really actually stunted in our collective development are line or our relationship to our body. So a lot of people, and I've run into this again and again so what does that feel like in your body? And we can name like, oh, this is sore or that. Yeah. But as far as like energy, subtle energy, sensation, like, can you feel the tops of your feet right now? So one of the things that helps in learning how to not override is to actually be in touch with. So most of us aren't. We're so up here, you layer technology on top of it, you layer being super busy on top of it. Most of us aren't even, what do I need right now, until it's so intense. So as far as like practices for that, like being still, if you don't actually have any access to sensation, like I just said, can you feel the tops of your feet? If I say, where do you experience anxiety in your body? And it's like, I don't really know. It's more of like a thought. Things like working with heat can help to even just start to feel subtle sensation. So like move your hands closer to further away and start to notice, okay, where do I feel the heat subtly? So you just but it requires a slowing down. It requires a paying attention. Meditation practices like body scanning, sensation awareness meditation practices are really helpful. And then also where the emotional component comes in. So there's overriding the body, but I think this is one of the big, massive pain points for women is, we make emotions wrong. Culturally, we make emotions wrong. And this is where I would say it's woven into part of what we're dealing with the patriarchy. And I've often gone like, do we like make emotions wrong because as a culture we hate women? I don't know. But men are unemotional, women are emotional. That's not true, by the way. That's what we culturally hold, right? That's not true. Like human beings are emotional beings. But we're raised where women are given more emotional intelligence and more emphasis on being emotional, and men, that's closed down. But there's a cultural, just because women are supposed to be more emotional, we're supposed to be more emotional and like emotionally chaotic, emotionally unstable. Like there's judgment on women being emotional. It's not like women are more emotional, and thank goodness for that. So these cultural overlays that we've got is, okay, if I'm like in a pleasant emotion, great. But if I'm in an unpleasant emotion, particularly anger, because anger is so unfeminine, then I've got to make that go away. So we not only override our bodies, but we override our emotional selves as well. So if you're having a hard time, or you're having a stress time, or you're having any kind of time where any emotion is present, what I've seen over and over and over again is that's wrong. I need to make that go away.
Yeah.
And that's when we get like heady, stressed, controlled, contrived, and push for some kind of external objective that's supposed to make us look better or feel better. But we're not actually honoring the fullness of our body, of our experience, of what's happening emotionally. So in terms of practice, I would also say starting to be able to name and stay with what we feel.
Yeah.
That's going to inform where we go next, and what we put our attention on, and what we put our energy into. And, you said something earlier that I feel like is a really important point to touch on, is well, I'm not enough, right? So if somebody's got from overworking to just, spinning all the plates, or all those different examples you've given of the superwoman complex that we have been sold on and then try to take on, it's like if I don't feel good, or I'm having an experience that I'm not supposed to have, we check outside of ourselves for how we're supposed to be, we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And when the interior doesn't align with that externalization, we go, I must be wrong. I must not be enough. Now I'm going to be a good girl and do the things that it's supposed to make. I don't know.
So, a couple really great things there. Where do I want to begin? The emotional thing.
Yeah.
So I love this topic because it was a perfect storm, everyone, when I started working with Chela last year, because in addition to feeling super dissatisfied with my business, I had just come out of a relationship. So I was literally like human soup. It was like I had just melted down and changed everything in my life all at once. And there was just this quiet decision. And here's why this is so important, what we're talking about right now. Because when we ignore our emotions, when we override our bodies for long enough, there comes a point where tragedy, trauma, injury, illness, stupid things start happening to get our attention. So we can either wait for those things, or we can just go into it. So I found myself in this perfect storm, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to let myself feel all of it. And that was the first time I ever did that. And what I found is that it just made all the healing quicker, because I wasn't investing energy into avoiding. It was like, all right, cool. Instead of putting the energy towards avoiding feeling the thing, it was putting the energy towards navigating feeling the thing. So I love this conversation about emotions. So if you have someone, or if you yourself have had this experience, some people are terrified of their emotions. They're like, what if I'm a monster on the inside? Yeah. And one of the interviews I did with Foxy Pickett, we talked a lot about shadow side. So we don't need to go into that. But for someone who's new to navigating the water of their emotions, how can they take baby steps into there and not necessarily feel like they just have to nosedive in?
Yeah. Well, and I don't think they could nosedive in. First of all, like it actually can be so scary. So, first of all, I think it's helpful to relate to, hold an image for emotion as water. Because it really moves, and sometimes it's like this kind of peaceful, wide ripple of like joy. Other times it's like crashing rage, right?
Yeah.
And, So in how I work with, or in how integral coaches and integral theory, we work with the emotional line, I think it's helpful to kind of understand what lower emotional awareness versus higher emotional awareness look like. So I'll name that, and then I'll talk about like what would be a baby step, because this might be helpful too. Like if you're out there and you're like, okay, well, I don't know, I feel like I'm super emotional. Does that mean I'm emotionally high? Not necessarily, especially if you feel like out of control. So if you don't have a lot of emotional capacity, and just to be clear, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. right? There's like unhealthy and healthy expressions at every level.
Yeah.
But it might look like I either don't feel emotion, like I can't touch it, or I'm very emotionally explosive and expressive. So being, one of the fears that you're pointing to is like, oh, what if I'm a monster? We interpret the intensity of emotion sometimes as this means I'm a bad person or I'm going to be crazy. So there are inappropriate expressions of emotion, absolutely. And that's mostly what people want to stuff down, is when it becomes intense. Either I'm going to lose control out there, or I'm going to lose control in here. I'm going to be a mess. I'm going to cry for days. I'm never going to get out of it.
Yeah.
That's usually the fear. Once you've got a bit more emotional capacity, it's usually something like you can name your feelings. So lower, you can't. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm feeling. But you can start to name it, like, oh, I feel embarrassed. I feel ashamed. I feel angry. I feel joyful. But then even there's an impulse to control, only want the good ones, want to get rid of the bad ones. Like, oh, there's anger. No, better stuff that down and generate joy, which doesn't work. Get to that in a moment. And then at a higher level of capacity, it really starts to feel like a rising emotion is like water that waves through. And why I say capacity, it's almost like your beingness, like your physical, emotional, energetic container is wider than whatever emotions arise. Cool. So rage can come up, but it doesn't mean rage has to explode out. I can feel really, really angry, but it not totally take me over. Or I can go with it and, hit some pillows, but there's a way but it can be navigated where it's not rage is all there is.
Yeah.
Right? So, if we can hold it like water, it becomes not, how do I get rid of this? Like, you're not going to get rid of it. It's just got to move. And that's one of the things that feels counterintuitive, especially when you're just kind of new to figuring out how to navigate emotion, is there can be a fear of, if I don't control this, it will take over.
Yeah.
And it feels like, and if I do, it doesn't. And you just pointed to that, like it comes out in some way. Mm-hmm. Even when we think we're making rational decisions, we're making emotional ones. Like, how many times have you been like blocked or stuck or stopped because you're terrified? Well, if you had some capacity around, oh, fear is just, look at that. I'm still going to do this thing I'm committed to doing. So at a real, if you're just learning to navigate it, I would start with naming it. So actually naming, and then seeing if you can identify where it's located bodily.
Cool.
Like, what's the sensation? Like, oh, I feel ashamed. Where is that? Is it some closure in your throat? Is it like a ball of yellow slime in your belly?
Yeah. So
that's it, is giving language to it, to yourself, and to identifying where it is.
I love that. I love that a lot. So what are some of the waters that you're navigating right now? Because there's always stuff, right? I think that's one of the most beautiful things about these interviews. I've got some of the most powerful and inspiring women on the planet here, and guess what? We've all still got our stuff, everybody. There's no arrival point where it's like, my work is finished here. I'm Buddha.
No, I'm not Buddha.
No. So what's some of the current stuff that comes up for you?
Some of the current stuff we did touch on a bit, like overriding and working too hard and pushing through. I've been in like, I can get activated by my ex-husband a bit. Mostly we're good, but like, speaking of moments where it's like, when you're just in a conversation and then it's like, oh, my past is right in front of me, and like I could have been way more skillful in that moment, and and we're both just like really committed to our son, and that's really great. But like those navigating those conversations sometimes are like, oh my gosh, I'm just projecting a whole bunch of stuff on you right now, and like I'm all like closed and trying to navigate this with skill, and I'm not. So that would probably be, as far as like the waters of emotionally charged, one of the more intense places for me. And then there's like the real sweet spots of my time and my commitment to my practice. So my yoga practice, my spiritual practice, my work can totally override that. So I'll have, okay, I'm going to have like this spacious, hour and a half home practice tomorrow morning. And then it'll be like my brain will start, it's fascinating to watch. My mind will start negotiating with me on this other stuff I need to get done. And then that'll win over. Sometimes, not all the time. This is the pull I'm in right now, is deepening my devotion to my practice, not my willpower, because that's a bunch of horseshit, but my practice, such that is actually priority over the things I need to get done, which fall into work or just fall into life management. Mm-hmm. So I will tend to prioritize all those to-dos, and not be in stillness as much as I'd like to, in like low energy, resourceful, loving myself. Yeah. So, and then in that too, and then this is where I get all like, is that then I'll watch myself throughout my day, which my days are pretty full. They're pretty packed. And I would say for the most part, I manage my time pretty well. I don't do a lot of like wasteful things. But what I do is I will task switch. And sometimes it can get like heady, and like I'm just going from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, and it makes me feel a little nuts. And then it's like actually not as effective as staying with one thing at a time. So that's one of the practices, is like, okay, what are you doing right now? And don't like flick over to email, Facebook, some other thing you think you need to do while in the middle of it. So that's my practice right now, is start to finish. I just finished a group program. That was a practice I gave a bunch of women in that. Like we're all kind of in this one together. Yeah. And inside that is also working with technology, which I find it's just one more thing to check. Yeah. Check my phone, and like then I'm distracted. And so I kind of like, I'm not in the kindest relationship with myself right now around how I use my phone.
Well, yeah. Because when I saw you, I turned off my phone and I gave it to you for 2 days. I was like, don't let me have this back. And I had to do like a cold turkey. That's a great, it's a great topic. It's interesting because we think of technology as being plugged in, but I recently wrote something where I called it plugged out. Because it's like we're plugged outside of ourselves. It's external. It completely supports what you were talking about earlier. And I think technology, meaning things like social media, whether it's Facebook or email or whatever, just being so accessible to people. Yeah. It's just another reason to not be in our bodies. It's like to not be here, to not feel, because it's behind a freaking screen. So,
you know what just occurred to, that I want to thank you for? Like, thank you for this conversation, because what I just realized is I hadn't yet seen that I haven't been kind to myself about it. Like I knew that I was like, this past weekend, I left the phone at home all weekend. Anytime we went out, and it felt spacious. I really needed a break. Like I was just really kind of wired in and not able to, and it totally made a difference. But layered on top of that was a judgment on myself, which I'm sure lots of women out there can relate to. Yeah. I've been totally being like, come on, get it together. This isn't good for you. How many times have you given a woman a practice of like, check your mobile maximum 4 times a day, and only to be effective, not to check out? Like I give that practice to people. So I was getting a little down on myself.
Yeah. But, and the thing is this, we can't be practicing all the things all the time. And I feel like that's part of the constant ebb and flow, right? Like I might be so consistent with my yoga and my meditation, but I'm checking my phone 150 times a day. Like I feel like we trade out. I don't think we're all ever completely great with all our practices on all systems. So I would love to do a little pivot from that conversation to wrap up our time on something that you and I discussed offline a couple weeks ago, which I think is just as women in relationship. It's just so valuable. And so for anyone watching, if you're not in a relationship with a man, I do apologize, because this is going to be specifically about relating to men and having more compassion to men, because we've talked in a couple of different contexts now about culture and conditioning in our society. And you brought up the point of emotion, how women experience emotion, how men experience emotion, how we think we're both supposed to.
Yeah.
And because I currently date a man who coaches men, I get to see behind the scenes of actually how damaging the patriarchal culture has not just been for women, it's for men too. Because there's so much pressure on men. And as women, it's really easy to be like, well, that's what they're supposed to do, remember? And like, and not have compassion for actually how hard it is for them. And I think the thing that sparked the conversation was this realization that I had not that long ago, how women, this day and age, women have the capacity and access to do, not everywhere in the world, but like we live in North America, so here for sure, we can do anything a man can do. And there's one thing men can't do that we can, which is make a baby. Of course, we need their input, literally, but where does that leave men? So what's your experience of this? How do you feel about this? Give me your juice.
Well, first, I really appreciate you speaking to like, oh, this hurts men. And I think, I identify as a feminist. There's a lot of conversation, my partner.
Pause though, because I love your description of a feminist. Can you explain your interpretation of what it means?
Yeah, because I think there is a lot of like, does this mean that we're man haters? Or women need to be, we're going to show why women are great and men are not. And I think that we need feminism just as much for men as we do for women. And that feminism, I hold it as the honoring and the valuing of feminine energy, or even as our teacher, Sophia, would say, the feminine genius. So, and yes, there's equality for women, which is needed, but specifically what, like even this emotion piece. So no, emotion isn't just a feminine thing, but being in the chaos of emotion, or being relational, being care-centric. These things, if we're going to go in the masculine, feminine domains, these are the more feminine traits, not female necessarily. That in our culture are not valued as high. Rights and freedoms go above care and community, especially in what's happening in patriarchal culture. It's like, individualism, pull up your bootstraps, work hard, move high, ascend. Even in masculine meditation practice of lift up and out, ascension, there isn't a embody, come into form, be in the chaos of creation. So part of, when I say I identify as a feminist, it is along all the lines of I want to see more women in power. I want to see more women in leadership. I want to see more equality all over the place, but also that I want these qualities of the feminine to be more expressed and valued in our culture and to be more embraced in men. Mm-hmm. And I think where we can, as women, start to notice too are, we complain, rightfully so, about being objectified, about being what a woman's place is. Now, feminism has done a lot to break down those barriers. And now we have, like you said, we've got opportunities. We can do anything we want. More women are getting university educations now than men. Like women are really rock inequality at higher levels, but there's a lot of movement happening there. But where does that leave the men? Do we still, now women should absolutely pursue careers. Men should absolutely be in the home. Is it the same that men should absolutely feel their feelings and share their vulnerability and express experiencing weakness and not know what their purpose is and not really feel compelled to make a lot of money and feel that, it doesn't actually feel even. I feel like as we are saying we want equality, and then we hear women going, but I want my man to be a man. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So I would love for us to inquire. And my partner and I, we've had these really great conversations about that, because I'll notice something come up for me around, and then I'll go, okay, I want to unpack this. Because there's something here like, is this a gender thing? Is this something I really need from you? Is this something that I think I need from you? To be the guy. So there's some like super juicy conversations happening over here in my home, where I'd like to get as responsible for that as possible.
Yeah.
So that he has, and my son has, and all other men have the freedom to be who they really are, to feel the fullness of who they are, and to pursue what's really important to them, and not be shamed for it. I mean, we totally objectify men. We objectify them as pocketbooks. And now, you know, there's even like what it means to be like all the physical stuff is happening to men like it's been happening to women too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so, I love hearing you say that. It reminds me of, you've read Brene Brown's Daring Greatly or no?
No.
Oh, wow. So there's a story in there where she talks about being at one of her lectures. She's talking about women being vulnerable and all this stuff. And this man in a yellow sweater comes up to her after and says, what about the men? And she was kind of like taken aback because literally all the years that she had spent researching shame and vulnerability, all the studies were on women.
Right.
There was like this baseline assumption that men don't experience these things.
Right.
And he was there with like his wife and his daughters. And he said something along the lines of, you see those women in the back of the room? They would rather see me die on my white horse than hear me talk about what is really. And that, I know. Go ahead, girl. Chela and I cry all the time. We're great at that. You don't
get through a conversation without a few tears. Oh.
And so what was so moving about that for me is I grew up, my dad is really emotional, which is, it's great because I got to be around, to contrast with my grandpa, who was very like traditional, like tough, don't express it. But my dad literally can't help myself. Like he cries all the time.
Yeah,
it's great.
And I cry. We get the cry going.
One of us. Yeah. I know. So, but I remember a conversation with my little brother once, and I remember going back and apologizing for this. It was when my dad found out that his grandmother, who played a huge role in raising him, died in Puerto Rico. We were in Pennsylvania, and he dropped to the ground and was sobbing. I've never heard sobs like this come out of a man. And my brother and I in that moment were like, I don't ever want to see that again. And I was like, and this was years, that was my senior year in high school. So just last year, I'm reading Daring Greatly, and I'm like, oh my God, I participate in this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and turning to my little brother and saying, I don't ever want to see that again, was also, in effect, saying to him, I don't ever want to see you do that either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But why not? And so these are the moments as women, right? We want our men to be expressive. We want them to be emotional. We also then need to be able to experience it, right?
Yeah. Well, and to hold it. And what occurred to me there as you were saying that is like, because there are masculine and feminine qualities, and they're all in both of us. And there is something to the polarity that happens when really embodying and expressing a feminine quality and feeling your man, feeling masculine. But I think, geez, this is a gender conversation. Like there's so much discourse about this all over the place.
Yeah.
So you just get into a lot of, well, but what about this? But what about that? And there is, so here's the question or the argument that I would almost hear come up in women, or can kind of feel in the background of like, okay, well, but what about needing to be able to count on your partner? Like sometimes we can associate, it's like that man up or die on my white horse or be heroic. I'd love to see some discourse and in couple to couple relationships, explain what does it mean to be able to count on somebody as a human being, right? Yeah. Like our partners want to count on us too. What does it mean to be heroic, and vulnerable? I think that there's some really interesting stuff to untangle around what our expectations are that we've inherited that's around gender that actually hurts men and hurts women.
Yeah.
And what are our needs where we can allow more of who we are to be received and be with it. So like, I want to be able to be with my man when he's crying. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to be with him and allow all of what he's dealing with, even if part of what he's dealing with is trying to deal with it, mm-hmm. to be a man. I want to be let into that. And if I'm casting judgment on top of it, or if I have a reaction and I'm not supporting him in his evolution in that way.
Yeah. So I love this. And so if you're watching, we don't have the answers, but this is an important conversation to be having with our partners, with our female friends. Like, how do we experience male vulnerability? How do we experience witnessing those feminine qualities in men? Because I do think that that's how we kind of unravel this patriarchal conditioning, is in recognizing that we both have all the qualities. And so we're allowed to be feminine and masculine, and our men are allowed to be feminine and masculine, and having more like integrated human beings with our energies. I did want to say one thing though, and I lost it. I think it was just around how to have these conversations. And so it's okay to tell people, this is new to me and I'm uncomfortable with this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's a vulnerable move, right? Whether you're a man or a woman.
Yeah.
I think if you're trying to and this is something around gender that can get super weird. Like if you have, and I've found it when I've had an idea of how I'm supposed to be or how a man's supposed to be, then suddenly the conversation is conclusion, as opposed to really going, I don't know. And any conclusion that arises, assume that that's a reaction to get curious about, as opposed to what's right.
Yes, yes.
So if you kind of both be curious, that would be an interesting place to explore.
I think that's amazing. And that brought back the thing I was going to say, is just to notice. So if we're going to start to recondition ourselves in a healthier, more like inclusive, integrated, productive, beautiful, loving, compassionate way, I think that was all the adjectives I needed to use there. For me, one of the helpful things is noticing anytime I hear myself say should or supposed to.
Yeah.
And making really sure to just pause and be like, where did that come from? No. Is that me? Or is it culture? Is it something my parents said, or, whatever?
Yeah, well, anytime we have it should be this way or it shouldn't be this way. I mean, I think that comes up even more in partnership.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be this way. He should be some other way. Get curious. Why? Says who?
Yeah. Oh, you posted a hilarious article months ago, I feel like. That was something.
The Onion?
Yeah, about I guess it was like a woman, like the man not being who he was supposed to, that she married or something.
Yeah, it was like, dear my ex-husband, mad at you for not being the man that you never were, but I projected on you that I would become one day. I think it's actually my ex-husband who sent me that article, and I was like, fair. That was fair.
So funny. So this was great. I mean, we went to many places and corners in this conversation. So you have a brand new, beautiful website. It's her name. It's cheladavison.com. You'll be able to spell that and see everything from the page here. And you primarily work with people one-on-one, and then now you have a new group program that you're running a couple times a year too, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, called Because. So looking at being at the cause of who we want to be, what we want to do, being more you, and doing work in the world that matters. And it's small groups, so maximum of 9. That's great. And intimate and rockin'.
Love it.
Yeah, and lots of content. I pump out content.
Yeah. Oh, her blog. She's such a great writer. She's just so good. So clear, as you can tell, and so fun. So fun to be able to have these conversations. So thank you so much. Is there anything like to tie a bow on this that you feel like you wanted to say that didn't get a chance to?
I think it's just to you. I really want to thank you, not just for having me here, but for your courageous work, and for gathering women, your skill around community building and gathering and giving women a voice. I'm so touched by it. And thank you for all you bring.
Thank you. This is how we usually end all of our calls, including our personal ones, with both of us either on the brink or full out in tears. So this was wildly appropriate. So thank you so much. Everyone, tune in for the rest of the interviews. Check out Chela if you loved her as much as I do. And we'll see you later.
Thanks, Liz.
For the most part, the masculine is going to be a bit more structured and predictable and linear, and the feminine is going to be a lot less predictable. My friend Ali Shanti, who's also coming up in a future podcast interview, says, one of her favorite aspects of being a woman is being consistently inconsistent.